Representative Peter Welch, sat in the back row of the House Oversight Committee hearing room, a manila folder resting on his lap. For 6 hours, he'd watched his colleagues lob softball questions at Pam Bondi. She answered each one with practiced ease, her confirmation as Attorney General seeming inevitable. Welch's turn finally came. He adjusted his microphone. "Miss Bondi, I have just a few questions." Bondi smiled. "Of course, Representative. During your confirmation period, specifically between November 18th and December 2nd, did you receive any payments from foreign entities?" The smile stayed fixed. "Absolutely not. I've disclosed all my financial arrangements." Welch opened the folder. "That's interesting, because I have documentation here showing a wire transfer of $340,000 from Volkov Energy Solutions to your personal account on November 23rd. The room went silent. Bondi's face went pale. "I have no knowledge of any such payment." Welch stood up, holding a document. "This is the wire transfer receipt. It bears your signature authorizing the deposit." Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. "That's not my signature," Bondi said, but her voice wavered. "We had it analyzed by 3 independent forensic experts, all confirmed it's genuine." Welch paused. Volkov Energy Solutions is owned by Dmitry Volkov, a Russian oligarch currently under federal investigation. Bondi gripped the table. "I have never met this person. I have no connection to any Russian company." "Then how did $340,000 end up in your account with your signature on the authorization?" No answer came. Welch wasn't finished. He pulled out a small recording device. "What I'm about to play is a phone call recorded on December 5th. The voices have been authenticated by the FBI's own audio forensics lab." He pressed play. Bondi's voice came through the speakers. "Kash, I need those Volkov records buried. Can you make them disappear?" Then Kash Patel's voice. "For how long?" 6 months. "Just until after confirmation. I can mark them as part of an ongoing investigation. That'll lock them down." "Perfect. I won't forget this, Kash." The recording ended. The hearing room erupted in chaos. Committee members shouted over each other. The chairman banged his gavel repeatedly. Bondi stood up. "That recording is fabricated. This is a setup." Welch remained calm. "We also have an email sent from your personal account to Director Patel on December 7th. He read aloud, "Thank you for your help with our mutual problem. Once I'm AG, you'll have the budget increases and operational autonomy you've been asking for. We take care of our own." Patel, who'd been sitting in the gallery, tried to leave. Capitol Police blocked the exits. "That email," Welch continued, "constitutes a clear quid pro quo arrangement. You promised to give the FBI director benefits in exchange for hiding evidence of your foreign payments." Bondi's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. She shook her head. "Representative Welch," she said, "you're taking things out of context. What context makes accepting $340,000 from a Russian oligarch acceptable? What context makes asking the FBI director to hide federal records legal?" Another committee member jumped in. "Director Patel, did you or did you not agree to conceal these documents?" Patel stood. "I invoke my Fifth Amendment right." "Of course you do," Welch said, "because what you did is called obstruction of justice." The chairman called for order again. "We're suspending this hearing." "Miss Bondi." "Director Patel, neither of you are to leave Washington. The Justice Department will be notified immediately." Within hours, news networks had the story. The recording played on loop. Legal experts debated the severity of the charges. That evening, Bondi's spokesperson released a statement. "Ms. Bondi has withdrawn her nomination for Attorney General. Effective immediately, she maintains her innocence and looks forward to clearing her name." The next morning, Kash Patel resigned as FBI director. His brief statement said only, "Due to recent developments, I can no longer effectively serve in this position." But the damage was done. The House Oversight Committee met in an emergency session. They voted unanimously to issue criminal referrals for both Bondi and Patel. The charges were severe: conspiracy to obstruct justice, accepting illegal foreign payments, attempting to undermine congressional oversight, abuse of official position. The FBI, now under acting leadership, opened a full investigation. Federal prosecutors began reviewing the evidence Welch had compiled. "How long have you been investigating this?" a reporter asked Welch, outside the Capitol. 3 months. He said, "We received a tip from a whistleblower inside Volkov Energy. From there we followed the money." But Welch's investigation wasn't finished. As his team dug deeper, they found more connections. Volkov Energy had made payments to 12 other government officials over the past 2 years. Some were small, $10,000 here, $20,000 there. Others were substantial. The common thread: all recipients had voted in favor of loosening sanctions on Russian energy companies. "This isn't just about Bondi and Patel," Welch told his investigators. "This is a systematic effort to buy influence in American law enforcement and legislation." They found shell companies, offshore accounts, and encrypted communications. The network ran deep. Dmitry Volkov himself became a target. Interpol issued a red notice. His assets in the United States were frozen. Intelligence agencies discovered that Volkov had been operating a sophisticated influence campaign. He'd identified key officials who controlled policy or enforcement decisions. Then he'd approached them through intermediaries with consulting fees or speaking engagements. Bondi had been his biggest success, an attorney general nominee who could potentially shut down investigations into Russian interference and energy sector violations. If she'd been confirmed, a CIA analyst told Congress, "We would have lost years of intelligence work. Ongoing investigations would have been compromised or killed entirely." The federal trial began 6 months later. Bondi and Patel were tried together on conspiracy charges. The prosecution presented the wire transfer documents, the recorded phone call, the emails, and testimony from the whistleblower, a mid-level accountant at Volkov Energy who'd been horrified by what he discovered. Bondi's defense argued entrapment and claimed the money had been a legitimate payment for legal consulting she'd done years earlier, but they couldn't explain the timing or why it hadn't been disclosed. Patel's lawyers claimed he'd merely been discussing hypothetical scenarios with Bondi, not agreeing to actually hide documents. The recording made that defense weak. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On the charge of conspiracy to obstruct justice, we find the defendant, Pamela Bondi, guilty. Bondi showed no emotion. Her lawyers immediately filed notice of appeal. On the charge of conspiracy to obstruct justice, we find the defendant, Kash Patel, guilty. Patel closed his eyes. Additional charges followed. Both were convicted on multiple counts. Sentencing would come later, but legal experts predicted significant prison time. Outside the courthouse, Welch addressed reporters. "This case proves that our system of oversight can still work. When officials betray their oaths, when foreign powers try to corrupt our institutions, we have mechanisms to expose and punish that corruption." Congress moved quickly to close the loopholes that had enabled the scheme. New disclosure requirements forced all nominees for federal positions to report any foreign contacts or payments within 24 hours. Penalties for non-disclosure became criminal, not just administrative. The FBI implemented new protocols for document handling, making it impossible for a single director to unilaterally classify or hide records without oversight. And a special task force was created to investigate the 11 other officials who'd received Volkov payments. Several resigned. Others cooperated with investigators in exchange for reduced charges. The accountant who'd exposed the scheme, his name protected by court order, testified before Congress about what he'd witnessed. "I saw the spreadsheet, by accident," he said. "It listed names, amounts, and dates. When I realized what it was, I couldn't stay silent. I have family here. I love this country. I couldn't let this continue." Congress passed legislation expanding whistleblower protections. The accountant received no financial reward. He'd made clear he didn't want one, but he was granted asylum and a new identity. "Heroes don't always wear uniforms," Welch said during the hearing. "Sometimes they're accountants who risk everything to do what's right." 8 months after the verdict, Bondi and Patel returned to court for sentencing. The judge was stern. You both held positions of extraordinary trust. Miss Bondi, you were nominated to be the nation's chief law enforcement officer. Director Patel, you led the FBI. Instead of upholding the law, you conspired to undermine it. Bondi received 12 years in federal prison. Patel got 10. Both would be eligible for parole after serving 85% of their sentences, but their careers in public service were over. Their law licenses were revoked, their reputations destroyed. Let this send a message. The judge concluded, no one is above the law, not nominees, not directors, not anyone. 2 years later, the case was studied in law schools as an example of both corruption and effective oversight. Welch, who'd become something of a folk hero, remained humble. I was just doing my job. The real credit goes to the whistleblower and to the investigators who helped build the case. But everyone knew those 34 seconds in the hearing room had changed everything. Without that moment, without Welch's careful preparation and devastating questions, Bondi might have become Attorney General, Patel would have remained FBI Director. The Russian influence campaign would have continued. Democracy requires vigilance, Welch told a group of law students visiting Washington. It requires people willing to ask hard questions and follow where the evidence leads, even when it's uncomfortable or dangerous. The students listened intently. What happened in that hearing room wasn't special, Welch continued. It was just oversight working the way it's supposed to. But that's rare enough these days that people remember it. The Bondi-Patel scandal became a watershed moment. It reminded Americans that accountability was still possible, that corruption could still be exposed and punished. Other investigations followed. The task force uncovered additional foreign influence schemes from China, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. Dozens of officials were charged. Some fled the country, others cooperated, and helped expose even larger networks. The system had been tested and barely had held. Welch eventually retired from Congress, but the reforms he'd championed remained. The protections for whistleblowers stayed strong. The oversight mechanisms kept functioning. Will it happen again? A journalist asked him during his retirement interview. Probably, Welch said. Power corrupts. Foreign adversaries will always look for ways to influence our government. But as long as we have people willing to stand up and expose it, whistleblowers, investigators, journalists, members of Congress, we have a chance. He paused. That hearing lasted 144 seconds. But the work that made it possible took months, and the reforms that followed will last decades. That's how you protect democracy, not with grand gestures, but with patient, careful, unglamorous work. The camera stayed on him a moment longer, then cut away. The story was over, but the work continued.